everyone. Now then, are you ready? Because I certainly am not. And if I ever am, something's wrong. I say as I drink my soda. So, for those of you who can't guess by the title, this is going to be a straight reading of Chapter 1 of Tempest's first book, Leashed Emotions. Since it's a straight reading, do not expect perfection. Expect me to mess up. Expect there to be some stutters here and there, maybe a misplaced word or two. But hey, I'm not here to be polished and professional. I'm here to do what I like doing. And I know there aren't people in here yet, but if anyone joins and you have a comment to make, you can post it off to the right, and if I see it, I'll react. I'll probably react during time skips, and whenever I do have a time skip, I will do this, and then I will wait a few seconds, check chat, see if there's anything there, and if there isn't, I'll continue reading regardless. Anyways, I hope y'all have fun. My head is so freaking itchy right now, and I need to freaking paste this places, but I can do that later. No, I'm gonna do it now. I'm gonna be stupid. I'm gonna be real fast. Don't kill me. I say as I die inside. Post. Okay, getting rid of that. Okay. I apologize in advance for my terrible British accent, but Tempest is born in Spagonia, so her native accent to me is British, so I'm going to be trying to imitate that to the best of my ability. Do not expect perfection, once again. Chapter 1. Nightmarish. With that, Thomas set off. With his sword in hilt and his friends by his side, he knew he could do anything. Tempest blinked, pulling up a remote and hitting pause. She leaned back against the wall behind her as she stared at the small television screen. Her brown eyes glistened from the dim glow of her TV. The girl had pitch-black hair that was oily, nearly like hay in its consistency. She released a quiet sigh. A perfect poker face rested upon her pale skin. I wonder what it's like. Tempest stood up, hitting the power button on her remote. The TV died instantly as she turned left, ignoring it. She took 4 steps and placed her hand on the wall when it was close enough. Her eyes followed the stars outside as she stared at them, for probably the millionth time in her life. Some twinkled, some glowed fiercely, and a few were incredibly dim. The canvas of the sky offered no reprieve to failures. Tempest raised her fist to her heart, saluting her soul companions. They were her only friends, apart from her parents, but those two were asleep in the dark hours, like always. Really though, don't you guys ever wonder? Well, if you could wonder. Tempest gestured vaguely with her right hand. I know you can't, but the question still stands. To my imagined versions of you, at least. Her eyes fell down to the shingled roofs above her. Tempest let her eyes trail each as she continued. It truly makes no sense to be born without emotion, without sadness, fear, anger, happiness, jealousy. You'd think my chemical imbalance, or lack thereof, would kill me. Tempest dropped her hands. Yet, here I am. A purple light filled the sky. A crackling boom crashed out from it as it slashed into Mobius. Tempest backed up as the glass in front of her shimmered, before creaking. She turned and covered her head with her hands. An explosion rocked the building. Glass slashed from the night, cutting open Tempest's hands. She grunted in pain, feeling fresh blood try to seep from the wounds. It was sent slamming into the wall opposite her window as a blast of air crashed through the opening. Tempest's body hit the ground as the wave of oxygen, ash, water, and other materials smacked against her back. The airwave passed on. The world around her screeched as if in pure agony, the building shaking. Tempest could just about feel the soil beneath her shoving upward, a force far below screaming as it was suddenly stirred from slumber. A sensation unlike any Tempest had ever felt rushed over her. Panic. She couldn't really label it precisely, but she could guess. It wasn't strong, incredibly faint, but it swirled around in her mind, poisoning her thoughts and making them anxious. Everything in her was skittish as the blast's explosions of glass and fire faded, leaving screaming and crying people in its wake. The world was plunged into a dark purple nightmare. Tempest lifted her head, shaking her hands a little. The cuts from the glass flicked blood on her floor as she held back a hiss of pain. It wasn't much, just 1 or 2 drops from probably 20 or so cuts. She glared at the floor for a moment, keeping her head turned away from her window. The glass was in pieces on the floor all around her. Her thoughts solidified. A sound like rushing air filled Tempest's room. It was combined with a nearly low growl of some beast, creating an unholy groan of darkness. 2 neon blue claws appeared on the broken shards of glass. They were connected to a midnight blue foot, which shortened into a leg, then broadened into a chest. Shoulders. Tempest took a step back. The creature below her was glowing, with a horn between 2 glowing pink eyes that became neon blue at the tip, nearly seeming to resemble a blade's edge. It had a horn on either shoulder, and its arms stacked into stocky pulverizers. The hands were 3-fingered, featuring a claw of neon blue apiece. The creature had light pink spots running up the back of its hands and arms, leading to a tail that swung out from behind it. There were some spikes of neon blue on the back of its head, the entire design reminding Tempest faintly of a frog. That thing looks awesome. Probably deadly! Tempest took a step back. Her foot met the wall, the crackling of glass making the monster blink. Beneath its eyes and horn was a massive mouth that stretched far beyond a human's capacity and glowed from within. The maw of the beast opened, and it growled lowly. Don't you dare. Tempest prepared for whatever may happen. The thing lunged. Tempest's fist went up, smacking the thing's head right below the horn. It dipped inward, screeching. Tempest let her legs fall out from under her. The creature slammed into her wall, a cracking sound escaping the brick. Tempest's arm was pulled back. She yelped. The monster growled. Its claws whispered across her arm. They grabbed it upon realizing what the thing it had was. Her arm was trapped between the creature and the wall. She was under the thing. There were broken glass shards all around her. This was going to hurt. Tempest's free hand wrapped around a glass shard. The monster began to turn around, grasping Tempest's captive arm. She felt the sting of the glass in her fingers, jagged edges all around. No time to mess around. The creature's head tilted down. The monster's eye came into sight. A scream of pain filled the air. There was no blood. A light of pink had been snuffed. Tempest noticed the creature spewing out some dark purple substance. She picked up another shard of glass. Clearly, this thing was still alive. Her hand shot up. Another screech. The girl's mind was a live wire. Was this fear or bravery? Her thoughts all screamed to run, save the one she listened to. This thing attacked her. If she didn't stop it, it'd attack someone else. That would not end well. On the bright side, the thing was blinded now. Tempest pulled out one of the glass shards, watching as the creature squealed in agony. She watched it squirm for a few moments, before plunging her glass shard into the center of the creature's head. Its screech was cut off as its eyes dimmed, the spewing of purple gas stopping. A sound like a completed spell filled the air. The monster vanished in the cloud of smoke and glowing white lights. The lights quivered for a moment, whizzing around Tempest as if uncertain of where to go. They seemed to figure out where they wanted to vanish to. For the next second, they were whooshing out her broken window. Tempest watched them leave, the sensation of burning on her hands filling her mind's thoughts. Wonder what that light was. She turned away from her window, silently glancing around her room. The television was dark, the only light being from the bright moon far above, as well as the dingy orange streetlights below. Her bed was right beside the door, on the opposing side of the room from Tempest. The purple sheets were shaded orange like the rest of the room, but they had all been scrunched up against the wall. Her books had been covered in dirt and debris, but her television seemed untouched. Well, it wasn't scratched at least. The shag carpet had been, pardon the pun, carpeted in glass. The glass was oddly placed due to Tempest having been in the way, and there were blood splotches on her walls. She crossed the room from the window to the door, turning the handle and leaving. Now I have to clean up blood. Focus on that, not the monster thingy. What the frick was that anyways? Okay, break one. No one said anything, but my mouth feels dry, so I need to take a drink. That felt so nice. Okay, random fact since no one's talking, and I guess no one will. The way I got my British accent, however false it is, was by watching the British show Doctor Who and repeating the line Doctor Who over and over for an entire summer. Literally just that one line. And then it just sort of bled into everything else. So I got a decent British accent from saying Doctor Who for an entire summer. Anyway. Back to the story we go. Thankfully this segment's a lot shorter. Thank goodness you were okay, Tempest. Tempest's mom pulled her into a hug, crying into her hair. If anything had happened to you, why your father and I, we would have fallen apart. Tempest's father nodded to his wife's statement while Tempest smiled to her mother. I'm just glad you're okay, Mom. You're both safe. That's all that matters. Tempest's mom continued hugging her for 2 minutes, crying and trying to hug her daughter to death. Still, those cuts and the glass, you shouldn't have cleaned it up on your own, Tempest. Her father added to the conversation. Tempest sighed as her brother Tempest does not have family. As her mother let her go, wiping at her nose. The woman grabbed a handkerchief while Tempest faced her dad. I couldn't wake you two up. I was just happy you two slept through the whole mess. The graying-haired man sighed in exasperation, rubbing the bridge of his nose. He was a well-built man, with a set of broad shoulders hidden poorly behind his plaid shirt. His eyes were a deep, deep blue, but his hair was nearly pitch black like his daughter's. His skin was nearly milk white like her own as well. The man's arms were barrel-built, and his legs were still muscular despite his advancing age. Tempest's mother had a bit of sagging skin around her stomach, and her skin was more of a chocolate brown. Her graying hair had tinges of dying brown to them, and her eyes, much like her daughter's, were deep brown. She was aging, as evidenced by a slight hunch in her back and the gray in her hair. Her arms were failing her, as were her legs, but the family clung together all the same. Yes, well, Next time something like that happens, wake us. Tempest's dad finished rubbing his nose. Okay, Tempest? It's hardly like... it's incredibly unlikely that will ever happen again. But okay. Tempest nodded to her dad. He smiled faintly, placing a hand on his wife's shoulder. Honey, go rest. I'll go see about the town. And Tempest? Tempest locked eyes with her dad. He didn't look away. There was a steely look in his eye, but it was warm, protective. Stay safe, and make sure Mom is too, okay? Of course, Dad. Tempest saluted playfully to her father. He chuckled, ruffling her hair before turning and marching out the door of the house. Her mother hugged her once more. Please, dear, stay safe. Why don't you spend the day with me? Her mother smiled lightly. Tempest nodded once. Okay. There. Goodness. I have so much mucus building up on my tongue. What is this? Oh, man. Oh, my God. Trying to do this live stream and trying not to die inside are both really difficult. I'm going to take another drink while I have the chance. Oh, my goodness. I so much prefer Dr. Pepper over this cherry cola stuff. I don't see y'all's preference in it, but okay. On we go. Tempest needed more information on what had happened. Her eyes were glued to the stars, neither a sense of wonder nor depression coating her. There was simply knowledge that the stars were there. She let her brown orbs flit to the streets below. The street lamps had come on, illuminating cobbled pathways and closed shops. A tasteful brown fringe to each restaurant's overhang was noted, the clicks and clacks of nightlife vague. Tempest watched as a few brave Spigonians walked the darkened streets. They never seemed afraid. Ladies sashayed along the brick, their designer bags glistening with an orange hue from the street lamps. Gentlemen in uniforms and suits marched up and down as well, but finding someone passing under Tempest's window was rare. She glared a little at the empty passageway, where glass had once stood, keeping the outer world separate from the girl's room, was now open air. There was no anger in her glare, just a simple, dark, scrutinizing gaze. I need to find out. Her eyes wandered up once more. Her hands clenched at her sides, the cuts that had dried burning faintly against her mind. You guys understand, right? The stars did not respond. That sound from the previous night suddenly appeared. A low, dark groan moaned over Spigonia. It wasn't in one place, but in many. Tempest's eyes shot to the streets below, watching as numerous beasts suddenly flipped into existence, hitting the ground with a clack of their claws. The monsters varied, from deeper blue variations with more spikes of that frog beast Tempest had fought, to tiny dog-like monstrosities that whimpered and quaked in their weakness. There were even little creatures that looked like pufferfish, warbling around with tiny fins as they tried to move. All the monsters wandered the alleys blankly, their various colors of neon hues brightening their areas. Tempest blinked, rubbing at her eyes. These things weren't truly real. Well, they had to be. Her hands were still cut. She remembered cutting a monster open. She had fought one, and probably nearly died. Her orbs narrowed in on a monster identical to the one she'd fought. Walking up to it was a young woman, who appeared not to notice the monster. Watch out! Tempest tried to shout. The monster lunged forward, disappearing as the woman's frame fell limp. She crashed to the pavement, her purse smacking against the ground. Tempest went silent as she stared at the woman. The woman spasmed, as if being electrocuted. Tempest glanced around her room, looking for some sort of weapon. She had a pocket knife somewhere. The sounds of the woman's body hitting the brick fell away. Tempest inhaled sharply, sending an odd, dark overtone to the air. The normal smell of brick and water was overrun by foreboding. That was the only thing Tempest could equate it to. Her hands brushed against a knife's edge as she pulled open a drawer under the television. She grasped it tightly, pocketing the tool and grabbing for her house key. She darted to the window. The woman had stood up, but there was something wrong. Her eyes were unfocused and distant. Her movements were choppy and weak. She picked up her bag and walked away. Tempest shivered. She let her eyes drift to the ground. There were no monsters under her window, and none close enough to notice if she were to fall. Tempest looked around her room. The television? It was plugged into the wall, no dice. Her bed sheets? Not likely to help with getting through the window. She thanked her dad silently for picking a window size that she'd be able to squeeze out of, even if she was about to sneak out. Tempest sighed silently, turning and facing her window once more. The cold air from Spagonia drifted into her room, bringing with it the smells of the city. Tempest placed her hands on the windowsill, feeling the blasted edges of a window exploded inwards. She grunted as she pushed down. Her feet scrambled against her wall for purchase as she tried to pull herself through the window. Tempest pulled and pushed herself up to the window, swinging her legs around to face the Spagonian streets below. Her eyes flashed back to the room. Blood on the walls. Memories that made no sense. Questions unanswered. I'll be back soon. We're back to another cutaway, because honestly, when I first started writing these, I had a lot of inspiration with the first segment, and then I sort of started losing inspiration as time went on. But yeah, I tried. In fact, this last segment is so small it can fit on my screen without a single extra scroll. So we'll see how that goes. Let's do this. Also, before I start, there are times where Tempest is talking in her mind, but because there's no proper way for me to do that in a live stream to show that she's talking mentally, you'll probably want to be following along with the story online at Quotev. I may just start doing this for when she's thinking, that way y'all know that it's a thought process and not, oh my goodness, she's still talking, what the heck. Moving on. That thing I fought obviously wasn't human, or of normal origin, so I've got to figure out where it came from. Clearly connected to the light in the sky, but what else? Tempest's fingers brushed the spines of the books on her eye level. All of them were history, but each one she passed, she remembered the details thereof. War of the Lilacs? Knew it. The debates of the tracks? Knew them too. She needed something she didn't recognize. Evidence of a Gaia? Tempest muttered, her fingers pausing in their tracks on an unassuming-looking tome. She pulled it out from the oak shelf, letting her eyes flit over it. The entire book was bound in standard bookwork, with a dark brown cover and white letters. They weren't fancy, more of a scrawled script. The book was written by Professor Pickle of Spagonia University. Really? I wonder what I can find out about this thing. Tempest opened the book, sniffing the pages for a moment. The scent of printed paper wafted up, covering the musty scent of the library around the girl. She closed the book, letting its pages slam quietly in the night. The library's lights had been dimmed for a number of hours at this point, but, well, Tempest had her ways. The library was a little bit cold, but Tempest dared to brave the freeze. She hadn't fully succeeded, as evidenced by how her ears felt like they were dying against her head, but no one had been around. Tempest glanced around the library, her eyes darting to each window. Outside were people and monsters. All looked pissed, tired, and depressed. It was simply extraordinary to witness. Tempest wanted to help them, but she knew that if she tried, the mob of enemies would descend on her, and she'd be a dead girl walking. Her eyes flashed to the back of the library. No windows. The moonlight tried in vain to reach the back of the library. In the darkness, there were only bookshelves. They were all nearly empty, with a few strategic places for a foothold making themselves known to those who dared find them. Tempest tiptoed to the back, keeping her footsteps on as much carpet as she could, which was nearly impossible given the library's dark wooden floor. Her ears nearly felt pricked, the freezing temperature making them seem like ice cubes. She heard the shelves creak, as if someone had pushed one lightly. "We're going to get some more chocolate, right?" a young boy questioned happily from behind Tempest. Her neck hairs stood on end as she darted to the bookshelves. The person had been too close to wait. "Wait, who's there?" The person tried to call out to Tempest. Her free hand and feet smacked the shelf as Tempest spider crawled up, not daring to look down. "I'm not going to hurt you. Just come back." Tempest's head smacked against the ceiling. She grunted in pain. There was a small handle above her, capable of being turned. She had felt it move a little when she hit it. The floor creaked as someone tried to follow Tempest's noise. She put the book on the other books on the shelf at eye level before raising her hand. She felt for the handle, sensing it as it creaked from her pressure. Found it. Tempest pushed as hard as she could. The handle turned, and an invisible passageway was revealed. Tempest grabbed her book. The footsteps got closer. "Wait!" She was already gone. And so ends the first chapter of this story. I don't get why you stuck around for the entire video, but I'm happy that you did. Oh, man. That was interesting. Let me know what y'all think of the video in the comments. And if you are okay with seeing more of this in the future. Because this is honestly a lot nicer than having to edit everything together. And honestly, I'm not all that professional and I don't like being professional. I prefer you guys see my screw-ups so you know that I'm human. Anyway. Y'all have a pleasant remainder of your waking hours. This is Ryder, signing off. And I don't know if this will work. Please work. Goodbye, everyone.